as well as using AI to actually automate lots of payroll processes, we should use AI to actually automate the process of switching payroll. So we're at the point now where basically you can literally take any payroll, doesn't matter if it's got 10 employees in it or 5,000, and just import it in. And literally minutes, you've got your payroll into the system. The workflow world, which is our world, is that never happens in our world because all these documents are links on the employee's app. So it means the payslip is a link, and employees generate their own payslip. Employees generate their own P45s. Employees generate their own P60s. So there's absolutely no workload on the part of the payroll professional to generate any of these. They're there. I want payroll people to absolutely love doing payroll and to be much more fulfilled by it and not feel stressed, not feel they're having to do overtime, not feeling undervalued, but really love doing it because they're able to provide a great service.
Managing a global team is complex, but Deel makes it simpler with payroll, HR, IT, and compliance all in one place. That's why over 35,000 businesses trust Deel to hire, pay, and manage their teams worldwide. See how Deel works at deel.com/nickday. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform. Hello and welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. My name is Nick Day. I'm your host. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We're specialist payroll recruiters. And today I am welcoming a payroll tech visionary to the show. More on my guest in just a moment. Before I introduce him, though, I want to remind you all to please remember to subscribe to the show. Please remember to follow the episode. And if you can, recommend it and share this with all of your payroll colleagues and friends, because it's together we're going to be able to raise, as a community, the profile of payroll. So who is joining me today? Someone I've known for many a year. In fact, he's an active member of one of our payroll leaders WhatsApp groups as well. It is, of course, Mark Paraskeva. Now, Mark is a seasoned payroll technology leader and current CEO of Payroll. That's payroll with an AI. More on that in just a moment. He's going to be here today to help us demystify the role of artificial intelligence in the world of payroll, something that I know many of you are asking many questions about and making lots of headlines at the moment. So let's demystify some of that for you all. With decades of experience shaping payroll systems, and as the former UK MD at Sage, Mark joins the show today to really unpack the real-world benefits, risks, and opportunities, which is really important, that AI brings to payroll professionals. From real-time pay and eliminating errors to automating complex edge cases, this is going to be an eye-opening conversation for anyone who loves this show, who wants to navigate the evolution of payroll in our digital era. So without further ado, Mark, welcome to the Payroll Podcast. How are you feeling?
Hi, good afternoon, Nick. No, it's great to be here. It's been a long time coming, but it's finally fantastic to get the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
Really excited to have you. You're someone that in the group has always been, I would say, ahead of the curve when it comes to AI. You've been demystifying things for some of our members for an awful long time. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to have you share some of your ideas and your knowledge with a much broader audience. So before we jump into the world of AI and payroll, let me start with a question I ask all of my guests. You may know what's coming. What does the word payroll mean to you?
Okay, yeah. So I think what it means to me, Nick, is 1980s PC desktop DOS. It means really manual. It means last century. It means a lot of data entry and clicking and doing operations, and it's just in a way shocking. And so that's what it means to me. Of course, that's if you like, in a way that the if you like, the catalyst for my story.
Fantastic. Well, let me dive into that then just for a moment, because often people think that payroll is just about numbers. So let me come back to you then slightly with that question. Is payroll, the word payroll, then now about something more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's if my vision, I feel like my view of payroll is, as I described, it's a very archaic, very manual process. And so I can't believe that that's what people are having to do every single day, day in and day out. Of course, very stressful, very laborious, and very manual. And the whole thing, of course, is I don't think it needs to be that way.
I agree. Well, let's give a bit of a foundation to today's talk. Obviously, I know your background very well. I know some of the work that you've done. Tell us a little bit about your view of payroll, your evolution in terms of your career through payroll as well. Just to give the listener more of an understanding about your background.
Yeah. Okay. So back in 2012. I got hired by the second largest UK payroll provider to head up their payroll organization. And before that, I had never been in payroll. So I spent my entire career in quite advanced computer-aided engineering. And so I think, as you often joke about, I'm one of those that fell into payroll, unfortunately. And I was just so I ran that division for 5 years. And after I left, I ended up advising private equity companies about payroll, both in Europe and the US. And I was just shocked at how manual payroll was. From the day I got there, almost to about 5 years ago, it was just shocked to me across the world how everybody, the whole payroll community, seemed quite happy to literally sit there, entering all the data, running their own manual workflows, doing everything like it would have been done in 1980. And it just seemed like an industry stuck in time. And so very simply, about 5-6 years ago, that's when I got together with my co-founder, and that's the beginning of Payroll. And that's what it was about. How can we really change the way people actually have to do payroll every single day?
Fantastic. And just to make this really clear for our listeners, we're saying the business is called Payroll, but it's spelled Payroll. The AI is very clear. If you were to look at this visually, you'll see that AI is absolutely at the heart and right in the middle of the word payroll, right in the middle of everything that you do, of course. And for me, it's really exciting from a slightly additional level as well, is we've got another CEO and founder of a payroll business here on the show. And we know a lot of people that listen to this may be working in operational roles, transactional roles, management roles, who want to get a little bit higher in their career as well. So really excited to have you share some of your views. Let's jump in with an area that perhaps people get a little bit frightened of then, because the idea of AI in payroll for many sounds really complex. And people are sometimes fearful of change and fearful of difference. We don't know how that's going to impact the industry. So where should payroll professionals really begin to make sense of AI in payroll?
Yeah. Well, when we started this journey 5 or 6 years ago, Nick, one of the things that we sort of struggled upon, and it's true in payroll, is how could people start using our system? Okay, how could they move from their current system sort of into our system? And whilst we hadn't initially thought about it, but it became evident very quickly that as well as using AI to actually automate lots of payroll processes, we should use AI to actually automate the process of switching payroll. And so that's what we've done. And again, we probably put probably more as much effort into this area of the product as others. And I think that the best example I think about is you remember how it used to be when you tried to switch a PC. You thought, I'd like to get a new PC, or I'd like to get a new phone, or I'd like to get a new tablet or something. And whilst you were excited, it was like this daunting task of, oh my gosh, it's going to take me days and to learn it, and weeks, and how to get my data over. And I think the best example, the vision is if you think about how iPhones are today and Android devices are today and so forth, is you sort of buy a new one, you connect them together, and literally in sort of minutes, all the data's moved over. And there might be a couple of bits you have to polish, but it's kind of all done. And so if you like, our inspiration was, we need to get payroll like that. We need to get to the point where someone can actually move their payroll data in, start trying it out, and do it very quickly. So that's what we did. So we took the approach of I know you're aware of this, is that every payroll produces a full payment submission file, and that's great because that's probably got about 80% of the data you need, but of course it doesn't have the other 20. So what we ended up doing was taking a full payment submission, coupling it with an additional Excel CSV to pretty much give us all the data, and then using AI to fill in all the missing bits. So we're at the point now where basically you can literally take any payroll, doesn't matter if it's got 10 employees in it or 5,000, and just import it in. And literally in minutes, you've got your payroll into the system. And we use a lot of AI to make sure, that's completely automated. But what we can also do is not just bring in, I think what you've probably heard about with others is the year-to-date value. And so let's say you're going to bring in June and move on to July. But what our system can also cleverly do is it can also set up a complete parallel run for the month you've just done. So if you've just done June in your current payroll and you import the data in 5 minutes is all in, you've actually got a parallel run of your June in the AI payroll, okay, which is really just quite amazing. What it means, and you've also got graphical compare, so you can compare the two systems together. But it really means that payroll professionals can bring data in and start to learn about it. And And we know payroll people are very busy, so they probably no way can they finish because moving on to new software and certainly AI is quite a lot to learn. And so it means you can start in June. You're probably not going to finish, but guess what? You then get some more time in July, and you just re-import again. And so having having this sort of level of automation, in many ways, is kind of the holy grail because it just means we saw it as one of the huge barriers in switching payroll and certainly learning AI. And so this automated import really makes it, absolutely possible. And I think one of the other big things that a lot of people don't underestimate is when you're moving payroll over, it's great to get all the year to dates, it's great to get all the bank details and on and so forth. But one of the big things that's often overlooked is all the automatic enrollment information. Is Nick automatically enrolled, or is he opted out, or has he been deferred, or so forth?
Yeah.
And so we use AI to recover all that automatic enrollment information. And that's why, as I say, it's really a virtually 100% way of getting in minutes. With if you like no manual work, that's typically the case. So in many ways, some people call it the holy grail of payroll, the fact that you can just switch using AI from your existing payroll into ours. And you can actually come in from any target payroll as well.
It's amazing. It shows how far we've come. And we've got a white paper available on our website, which is, let's be honest, is now out of date based on what you've just mentioned. But it was a blueprint for a successful payroll implementation project. It was written by the wonderful Jeanette Hibbert, but it was written about 6 years ago, probably roughly when you started. And of course, at that time, it would take 3 to 6 months to really move through a successful payroll implementation project. And you used the phones in your example. We now know as our phones as being smartphones. It sounds like you've developed a process here for having smart payroll. And it's, we get used to it. My son recently has got a Switch 2, and I just put his Switch 1 next to his Switch 2, and within moments it transferred all the data across with no manual intervention, something that years ago would have taken ages. You mentioned
Indeed. I mean, the other thing just to add, Nick, is for bureaus it's a lifesaver because the other thing is we often think about individual employers, and they've probably got one payroll to move, maybe a couple. But you think about bureaus who have got hundreds. I mean, we've got one that's doing what I just described now. They've got 800 payrolls. Wow. And there's no way they can move them over in sort of a week or a month. They're basically having to spread this out over many months. So the other great thing about this is that you can spread the workload out. And so that you can do it, if you like, not at your leisure, but when you've got time. Because the other thing, of course, is the other thing that stops payroll professionals moving or looking at new software is they've got no time in their day. Their day's maxed out. And even if you said, well, I just need 15 minutes or half an hour, well, they don't have half an hour every day. So the fact that you can spread something out over, if you like, many months is an absolute lifesaver as well.
Yeah, I can see why that would why that would be really beneficial and really, really of interest to payroll professionals for sure. You mentioned a couple of buzzwords. I want to try and just clarify some of those for our listeners because you mentioned automation quite a few times. We've talked about AI. I have my own view, but I think people sometimes get confused between the terms. And we've got sort of new AI, we've got agentic AI now, and it all kind of changes. I wonder if you can just help clarify some of these terms in the way that you're using them in a payroll context so that our listeners can really get to grips with understanding what this looks like.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think sometimes, it's a spectrum. And so I think the way we think about AI is it's a whole set of sequences of technologies that start from the most basic and perhaps go to, if you like, to the most advanced. So the most basic level is probably just clever automated software. But sorry, let's go back a bit. I think really we try and couch it in the sense of it's artificial intelligence. So it's trying to do what, if you like, the human does. Okay. And so at one level it's just, clever software. And then probably the extreme level, it's something like, can you take a whole bunch of data and then work out if someone is automatically enrolled or they're opted out or they're deferred, okay? Which is probably, like the most advanced level because you don't get told that. You have to infer it, by using all the rules and the matching. So, for example, how old are they? Did they make any contributions the last year? Are they even earning enough to actually meet the threshold? So there's, if you like, so it's definitely a whole range of, and I'll talk through some more as we go through, but from very simple to actually very, very advanced.
Good. And one question that a lot of, and I've made this mistake. So when I first saw the benefits that AI could bring to the recruitment space, I immediately went out and started training myself. I did a Python certification and all these different courses. And then you realize and it was a lot of time, personal commitment over weekends, upskilling myself, making sure I had the knowledge to be able to talk eloquently and intelligently around what was happening in the market. But then you suddenly realize when you look at the solutions that I don't need to know the nuts and bolts because the software often does it for me. I need to have an understanding for sure. Went too granular. So the reason I
That's
bring
right.
this up for payroll professionals who want to upskill, who want to really get ahead of the curve and be familiar with AI, where do they start? Do they need to have a tech background? How can we immerse ourselves? Or actually, should we just be relying on software providers like yourself to do the heavy lifting for us so that actually just let our jobs be a little bit easier? We don't need to be tech gurus. We can just embrace the solutions that get delivered to us. Where's the limit? Where are the gaps? How would you see it?
I think it's a dual approach, Nick. It isn't just one. No, I don't think it's the fact that you can just switch software. One of the reasons why we sort of developed the import that I just described is there is a fair amount to learn. And so, for example, it is important that as you pick up new software and using it, you're also learning. So, for example, our customers probably have to get quite a bit more proficient in Excel and spreadsheets than they were before. They also have to get a lot more, if you like, fluent in what I call programming the AI. Because the AI is brilliant, but in many cases, you've actually got to tell it how you want the result to be. And so in a way, I think that the big thing to think about is the payroll professional now becomes the programmer and not just the operator. So I think it's doing both at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. That works for me. That's probably what I'm trying to achieve from a recruitment standpoint, so I can resonate with that. But we also, you mentioned a couple of times, payroll is absolutely packed with manual data entry.
Yep.
A lot of payroll time is taken up doing endless checks. So can we trust AI to handle it? How do we get over the trust gap?
Yeah. Okay. No, good question. Okay. So yeah, well, I mean, the thing about payroll is when you think about it, you step back, there's probably three parts of payroll. There's obviously getting the data in, they're sort of doing the processing and then getting the data out again. And so absolutely. So once you've say migrated over, the first challenge, whether you're doing weekly or monthly payroll, is how are you getting data in, through every payroll cycle. So one of the things that we saw key is the humble spreadsheet. Okay. And so one of the first things that we're able to do was basically provide spreadsheet entry. Now, of course, you're going to turn around to me, Nick, and say, but spreadsheet entry is not new, Mark. Every payroll tool's got spreadsheet entry, aren't you?
Oh.
Right. But here's the difference. With every tool that's out there, the vendor often says, here's our spreadsheet format. Get the data into that format and we'll bring it in. Okay. So if you're able to put your starters or your shifts or the salaries in that format, absolutely, payroll professionals can press a couple of buttons to get the data in. Okay. So that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about importing any spreadsheet. And if you think about any company today, they're actually full of spreadsheets. HR, the HR organization's got salaries, people have got timesheets, people have got all sorts. So what we really set about doing was building AI software that can read any format spreadsheet. So that would mean it didn't matter whether you had your name, Nick Day, in 2 columns or 1 column, okay, or Day on a Nick, okay. It didn't matter whether your mobile phone number had a plus in 1 column or a plus in front or whatever. It didn't matter whether you use a US date format or English date format. In fact, it didn't matter what the columns were named. Doesn't matter what the columns are numbered. For example, if you want to, miss out gender and take it off the title and things like that. So I guess the first technology that we sort of put together was the ability to ingest any spreadsheet. So suddenly now, instead of payroll professionals having to type all this stuff in, okay, which is because there's a lot of data, is that they can actually get spreadsheets, data from their HR department, or if you're in a bureau environment from your clients, and literally throw it at the AI. And of course, that gives you the same efficiency you had before. But now the huge difference is you're using the existing customer or client spreadsheet, not one that you've had to manufacture. And that's a huge difference. So there's a fantastic example of advanced AI where literally you can throw virtually any format spreadsheet of the software and it comes in. So in our system, our customers never type in and enter a new starter. They never have to upload salaries. They never have to upload shifts, holidays, and things like that. So, suddenly, this huge amount of data entry is kind of, if you like, is taken off them. And the other thing that we coupled with that, the other really nice thing that AI can do is it can do a level of checking that currently I'd say often the payroll operator does. So for example, as data comes into our system, we validate every NI number. So in the same way that a payroll professional can look at an NI number and say, no, that's not right. That's got some letters missing, or there's too many numbers, okay? We check that. And it's remarkable to me how many other systems don't check it. So we check NI numbers as they're coming in. We check bank details that are coming in. Okay, so we do sort code, account number checking, things like that, okay? We check date of birth. So as well as putting all this data in, a lot of this checking gets done, automatically, which is obviously a huge, huge time saver and a really, a really smart use of AI.
Fantastic. And we know that AI, that's its, it's a tool to augment what we do. And one of those to augment what we do, we need it to save us time. I think the other element there is, of course, if we're not retyping or editing, less manual intervention usually means less errors. Errors are often made because we've added an extra digit, because we've tried to move something across, or we've mistyped a date of birth or something like that. So that makes total sense to me as well.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Nick, is once you've got automation like that and you're able to just bring in data. So, for example, if people have got HR systems, all HR systems can output a spreadsheet. All HR, TNet, time and attendance systems can typically output shifts. So, the great thing with that automation is, let's say we discover on entry that there's a bank error, an account number or sort code error. You can immediately go back to the HR system, fix it there at source, which is the right way of doing it, of course, export the spreadsheet and bring it in again. And so suddenly you haven't got this situation, which is that's the other thing that we saw everywhere, where payroll was an island because data was fixed in payroll and it still continued to be wrong in the HR system. So by actually coupling, the systems together through techniques like this, it means that suddenly your whole approach changes and everything can stay in sync.
I'm a little bit tongue in cheek for me here, but it means also you can hold HR accountable for the errors, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, indeed.
Which is quite nice. I think the important thing for me is the word trust that we talked about. We know that payroll is probably the only thing that touches every employee every single month or every single fortnight, depending on your pay cycle. No other function really does that with the employees. So trust is important. Payroll, right? We can break that trust very quickly, and people will start to look for new jobs. It can impact attrition, all these different things. So payroll, I think now, they are charged with that huge responsibility of trust to get these bits right. So the importance of having more time to do that and being more accurate in the way that we do it, I think is really important. However, there's a lot of headlines that talk about, we had one with in Forbes just last week that I did a webinar on, a lot of these reports saying that with AI, it means we won't need payroll administrators or payroll professionals in the future. So this all sounds great, but where do you see the role of human oversight versus system-led validation and versus AI systems? Where do you see the role of payroll evolving?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think it comes back down to this, is that today that the payroll person is the operator. They're the ones that enter the data, push the buttons, run through this process or whatever. And I think with AI, it really does change to that payroll person being the programmer. Okay, so let me give a couple of really concrete examples, which hopefully your viewers will appreciate. So something like salary proratering. Okay, brilliant example. Okay, of having to someone starts midway through the month, leaves midway through the month. What do payroll professionals do now? They go and get the calculator. Yeah. They go and get the calculator, work out what's the value got to be. Okay, and so one of the things that you can do with AI, of course, is you can tell it how you'd like the prorating to be. And so in a way, so you set, if in our world it's a scheme, it's a salary scheme. So you set up a salary scheme that says that this salary should be prorated by 365, should be prorated by 260, should be divided by 12 in working days, divided by 12 in calendar days. So in a way, what's happening is now the payroll professional, instead of doing the operating, is stepping back and, if you like, being the programmer and telling the code literally, this is how I'd like you to operate. Okay, so there's a simple example of the salary scheme, but let's take a better example of holiday schemes. Okay, so let's imagine you've got some irregular hour workers. Okay, I think the job of payroll now becomes programming the holiday scheme so it can operate completely automatically. So for example, if you've got irregular hour workers and you want to do a 52-week average, or you'd like to do 12.07% rolled up holiday pay, or you'd like to do accrued hours and then paid at 52 hourly rate. The payroll professional's got to understand all those holiday schemes, and if you like, set the scheme up and configure it. And there might be variable pay workers who get a salary and then some variable pay on top, and there might be some salary workers. So I've just described 5 completely different types of holiday schemes. So I think the role now becomes for the payroll person to understand those, if you like, and specify the schemes. And then what happens when the software runs is the worker can just come along and book a holiday. They want to be off for 3 days next week. The manager approves it on their app, and it goes into the payroll. Now, all that's happened automatically because, if you like, the payroll professionals understood what needs to happen and who needs to go into which of the schemes, and so it can all operate automatically. So I think in many ways it really ends up being the payroll person, as they becomes the programmer, and that can also extend to other areas like automatic enrollment as well.
I'm Nick Day, host of this podcast, but also founder of JGA Recruitment Group. And here's what I hear every week from top HR leaders. They say, Nick, we can't find the talent. It's our biggest challenge. And when we do, we can't retain them. Well, that's where we come in. At JGA, we specialize in HR recruitment and only HR recruitment. From executive search assignments placing CHROs, to contingency hires finding HR pros, to global HR transformational contract placements, and every people role in between. Across every vertical and at every single level, we know where the top people are, what motivates them, and most importantly, how to get them excited about your opportunity, even if they're not actively looking. With engagement rates over 90%, we don't rely on job boards. We rely on relationships. We place fast, we place right, and we do it in a way that reflects your brand, your values, and your goals. So if you're building a strategic HR function, please don't leave it to chance. Visit jjrecruitment.com or reach out to me directly, and let's build the future of work together. I love that example, and there's a couple of reasons why. One is it really highlights why payroll expertise is absolutely needed, but also you highlight the complexities of payroll in the sense that payroll has nuance. It's not always as binary as a single rule. Sometimes one problem could have 6 different answers, of which all might be right until we get HMRC clarification.
Yeah.
And I think, therefore, it actually puts the importance back on the knowledge of the payroll professional to make sure they're setting the programming, in your words, those rules correctly to get the right result at the other end. And I think that hopefully will give some encouragement and to our listeners, say, hey, look, we need the knowledge. You get somebody that doesn't have the knowledge, they won't know what rules to apply. They won't know how to program the AI in that instance correctly. So hopefully that gives some people some support, some encouragement that absolutely payroll knowledge is going to be needed beyond, because we also know that legislation is always changing, complexity is always advancing as well. And I think you gave a great example there about some of the smart workflows that now exist using AI. I wonder if you can go into a little bit more detail about how we can start utilizing AI in relation to policy rules, smart workflows, learning from patterns, things like that can, again, help elevate the work that they do.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, I suppose another example there, Nick, is automatic enrollment. There isn't just one size fits all for that too. So, for example, being able to program the fact that in a typical company environment, there will be many automatic enrollment schemes. And what happens today is the payroll professional is normally, this cohort's got to be postponed. This one's can go in immediately. These ones have to stop at age 65. These ones, when they go on maternity, get full pay or whatever. So again, programming that in, I think, is a key thing, so it can literally operate all automatically.
One question I have with AI,
yep.
I'm a huge advocate. I'll be very clear and transparent to that for my listeners. Huge advocate. It's coming, and we need to embrace it and utilize it and help it make our lives better and more effective and augment what we do. Payroll errors traditionally have always been part of the inevitable of payroll. We always dream of getting 100% every single month, week, or bi-weekly, whatever it is you run. But inevitably, there are things that happen that make that very difficult. Or do they, going forward? Do AI-powered workflows and real-time verifications, do they start to change the narrative? Or can we start to see organizations now of a size of, say, 5,000 employees start to experience regular 100% accuracy? Or is it still enough manual intervention involved, enough complexity to say that's still probably a little way off? I'd be interested to get your view.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good question. I think probably the way I'd answer this one, Nick, is to, if you go back to real life example. So imagine yourself, you're sitting, at home or in your office, and an email comes through from your bank, and it says your statement is ready. Okay, and you go click on the link, you go through, log into your bank, and you click on the link, and suddenly your statement appears. Okay. Now, what not a lot of people realize this, but the fact that you clicked on that link inside your online banking is you triggered a whole workflow. And that workflow that you triggered generated that statement. So that statement wasn't generated by your bank and put behind the link. Okay, it never existed.
I didn't know
that. It was generated by you right there and then. And the really elegant thing is, it's also the only GDPR way of doing it, because that statement now only exists on your smartphone or tablet or PC because you generated it. Okay. Now, take that a bit further. So why did I give you that example? Because you think about, contrast that with what payroll people do today across, everywhere. Okay. They create pay slips, and they create P60s, and they create P45s in their payroll software. And then they'll do one of two things. The first really bad thing is they'll email out. Okay. So financial documents should never, ever be emailed out at all. And that's why your bank or building society would never email something to you. That's the first thing. Okay. Or they might shuffle them all up to a portal. But either way, and even though it might take only a few minutes, it's still work that's got to be done. You're preparing these documents and moving them up. Okay. Now you think about, the workflow world, which is our world, is that never happens in our world, because all these documents are links on the employee's app. So it means the payslip is a link, and employees generate their own payslips. Employees generate their own P45s. Employees generate their own P60s. So there's absolutely no workload on the part of the payroll professional to generate any of these. They're there. So for example, when we come to March, every one of our customers' P60s is there, and no one has to do anything. It's actually, it's there sitting there, and the employee can look at it. Now, so you sort of got to take this idea that, so now the idea becomes, well, the payroll person doesn't have to do everything. We can actually move a whole bunch of things into self-service. So one of them, hopefully you can see really clearly, is payslips, P60s and P45s now become completely self-service generated, and the payroll professional never has to do anything. Okay. But then what you can also do, and this is one of the things that we did, is that we took this notion of LivePay onto the employee's app. So now, as well as looking at their historic pay slips, what all our customers' employees can do is, before, let's say imagine they're going to get paid on the 28th of the month. On the 1st or 2nd of the month, they can go in and click a LivePay button. And that runs a whole mini workflow in a fraction of a second that shows them their LivePay as they were going to get it. Okay. So in a way, they're not running the whole payroll. They're directly interacting with the system, but they're running their own individual payroll. So that means, for example, their salary gets changed, they'll see immediately. If they've got a bonus, they'll see immediately. If their tax code changes, they'll see immediately. Okay. So one of the biggest things that we found with if you like, these workflows is the employees just absolutely love it, because now for the first time, payroll switches from a batch process where I probably only see my pay slip either right towards the end of the month or even after it's been paid in my bank, to actually get to interact with it from day one. Okay. And so employees actually love it, because suddenly now payroll becomes interactive, just like the rest of their life. So, they're looking at Facebook, they're looking at email, they're looking at Twitter, and suddenly they can just flip and see what's my payslip going to be. Okay. So we've got, for example, large companies that work in the retail and the fast food sector, where employees are clocking in and clocking out every day, and those clients are uploading the data to us, and every single day they can see their shifts month to date. So 24/7 now, people are able to just run up our live payroll and actually see what they're doing. Now, so back to your question, how does that answer your question? Well, we think it's been the biggest way to actually remove errors. Okay. Now, I don't think we quite get to 100%, because it does rely on someone looking at their payslip and reporting it. But suddenly now with LivePay, and if you take the fast food example I showed you, that a worker can look at their payslip and they might see, their live payslip, sorry, and they might say, oh, yesterday my hours were wrong or my rate was wrong. They can then go back to their manager, not the payroll department, importantly, get it fixed again in the time and attendance system, and the next day when the feed comes, it's been corrected. So suddenly you get automatic self-correcting with so many loops and flows that you never even thought of through LivePay. So one of the biggest things, so absolutely, we still think obviously, all the digital entry, all the checks have to happen, need to happen, but LivePay, I think, is a bit of a game changer, because what it means is that, people can actually check their pay. So in the same way as I know my Amazon deliveries, 3 doors away and it's going to be here in 45 minutes, I kind of know what I'm going to get paid. So I think that's a key thing. But so it's this self-service idea, I think, dramatically changes. So being able to generate their own pay slips is amazing. Being able to run live pay and live interactive real-time pay beginning of the month is great. But then, of course, we give employees the ability to change their address and bank details. So again, that removes, the opportunity for errors. And again, that checking I talked about on the sort codes and account numbers, that same checking applies on the employee app too. So the employee stopped from entering a bad bank account and sort code as well. So, but again, if their bank account changes, it doesn't have to go on a bit of paper to the payroll to get typed in. It goes straight in on the app. New starter forms is the best example, Nick. So the new starter form, which typically has the ABC on it, those again put somewhere, go through a very tortuous path, probably typed in by payroll. Well, again, in the world of automation, is in our app, the employee, the starter, puts in their starter declaration, and the tax code is computed automatically, and they see it on their live pay slip. So literally, they can enter their starter form and go to live pay, and their tax code's done. So I think that kind of self-service and the ability to actually move part of the process through to self-service is probably one of the biggest areas that we see that can actually reduce errors down to zero.
Yeah, great example. Very clever, by the way. Very clever. And hopefully people are excited by some of these changes, particularly if you're a payroll person who is perhaps doing a lot of these processes manually. To be like, oh my God, that would save me so much time. So let me ask that question. How much real time can payroll teams actually save with this level of AI and automation in your estimation?
Yeah, okay, no, great question. So it definitely varies. I think it depends on, there's no one answer I can give you, but I can give you a range of answers. If I take probably the worst case or the smallest improvement, I'd say it's never less than about 50% of the workload. Okay, wow. And that's probably for like the least good end. At the best good end, a lot of our customers, particularly if they're having to load in thousands of shifts, for example, okay, end up moving a process that basically they can literally save 3 days a week, okay, and their days, and that's 3 days ending up sort of being 3 hours or something. So at the other end of the spectrum, it can really be quite dramatic, and it really allows them to, I think, enjoy a much higher quality of payroll life, if that's the best way of describing. It de-stresses them, and it really makes it much more enjoyable, because now they can focus a lot of their time on other much more important things than sitting there typing in new starter forms or checking bank details or loading starters or whatever.
I think it's a good point. There is when I see it from the recruitment lens, there's a lot of burnout in payroll. A lot of people very stressed, worried about taking breaks, worried about obviously paying everyone accurately, on time, compliantly, and the stress often under-resourced. It's why we have an agency that does what we do, because they are under-resourced, under-financed. And I think you raised some really good points. If we can ease some of that pain, then that's got to be a really, really great thing.
Well, and that's one of the other nice things about live pay, Nick, which is if all the employees have the ability to see their live pay, and what we found is that even if you just give them 3 hours notice on a smartphone, that's more than enough, right? So even on most of our customers are weekly, some are monthly, but we have some actually running daily. So even the daily customers just give their employees 3 hours to check their live pay slip. And the fact that you've given the employee 3 hours to check it means if there is an error, and let's say they didn't, the fact is they had an opportunity. So they had the opportunity to see what they were going to get. They didn't do it, and they didn't report it. So suddenly it massively reduces, if you like, exactly, when they get there, absolutely.
Yeah, sure. I like that. Well, a couple of questions coming away from the solution and your experience, of course, with your great real case examples. I want to bring the conversation around a little bit just to help demystify some of those elements on AI. So are there any kind of misconceptions that you think or you've heard payroll leaders have about AI that we can by?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we see, Nick, is that there's this, what payroll people to do today, which is very operational, and as you mentioned at the beginning, people have got to get paid, data's got to go in, there are deadlines to meet, and so forth. And so there's there's a lot of, I think, if you like, talk and hype about all the big things AI can do. And I think there's this huge, and I think for most payroll people, they sort of can't bridge the gap. It's like what I'm doing today and what I hear talked about a lot is just massive. It doesn't make sense. Okay. And so that's why we think it's got to get right down to much, much closer to what payroll people do today. And in a way, and I don't think the technology is to do all these really high level things that would actually remove the person. So it's a lot about trying to add these incremental small things that when you add them up make a huge, huge difference. Okay. Yeah. And so I think that's really what it comes down to.
No, that makes sense to me. And then, so taking that level further, then, what skills, from your perspective, do you think payroll professionals do need in what is either now or is becoming an AI sort of augmented future?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think one of the things that we see is that when people are operating AI systems, they are different. Okay, they do operate differently. They are more technical. They do require, a higher technical level of knowledge. And so, for example, if I give you a couple of examples of automated workflows. So now most payroll people don't sort of realize, but when it comes to the approval day, they go through they sort of have a workflow. They don't realize it, but they go through a workflow to approve the payroll. And then they go through a workflow to send the full payment submission to HMRC, go through a workflow to upload stuff to the pension provider, and then the bank file. And so, of course, once you get into the AI world where you literally, in our world, you push a button, and that kicks off a set of hierarchical workflows. It kicks off a payroll workflow, and it kicks off sub-workflows underneath to send the FPS, send the EPS, send the bank file, send the bookkeeping file, and so forth, okay? But of course, the other thing is, just like today, these workflows don't always work. So why don't they work? Well, maybe the internet's down. Maybe HMRC aren't responding. Maybe Nest aren't responding. Maybe they couldn't get through the bank. All these things. Or maybe there was another error they'd missed, for example. Yeah. And so in a way, being able to understand hierarchical workflows is kind of a new skill that they wouldn't have had to have, because almost it's a bit like riding a bike. You don't think about all the mini steps you do to ride a bike. And so in a way, suddenly now when you kick off and you say, AI, go and do this hierarchical workflow, you've also got to understand when something goes wrong, how would you fix it? Okay. And so, for example, if the submission to HMRC doesn't work, they need to go look at it and they need to figure out, right, did it not work? Because in a way, the AI is limited. We can only do at this point so much. So we'll do as much as we can. But this is a really important point that I think we learned working with payroll people is that when something goes wrong, you need to hand control back to the person. That's absolutely crucial. People have got to get paid, and you couldn't get through to HMRC or it just got rejected. A payroll person's got to step in and have a look at it. So stepping into these workflows, looking at them and saying, right, let's look at the error. This error was because HMRC weren't responding, so I'm going to continue a bit longer. Oh no, this error was because, oh gosh, there weren't enough address lines, or there's something wrong in another area. So I think it's understanding what went wrong and then taking the right course of action. So is it retrying that submission? Is it perhaps redoing the whole payroll again because I've actually already changed something else? A bit like the HR example I gave you. So I'd say these are new skills that definitely, payroll people need to embrace. It's a bit like I explained programming the AI. There's also looking at what it does and being able to actually help it when it doesn't actually do exactly what you want it to do. So most times it works, but of course not. The real world isn't perfect.
Sure. I'm going to ask you quite a challenging question in a moment, but just reflects what you just said. And I've said in a couple of my talks, AI is helping move payroll from back office to front line, from cost center to impact driver. And I mean that because payroll now is fully embraced in the employee experience. As AI develops, new payroll processes and challenges will also come through. Things like the tokenization of payroll, for example. As we evolve and people may in the future want to be paid in different ways. Maybe they do want digital wallets and things like that. We've got to be able to evolve to those. here right now, but these things potentially are coming. So AI will also create new nuances and new challenges for us to overcome in payroll. So if we can save that time now, it gives us more bandwidth to introduce some of these perhaps new processes in the future, which I think is really exciting. One thing you mentioned though about the idea that we can press a button to run these workflows much quicker than we can do is humanly possible. I'll never forget the podcast I ran with Ben Johnson, who was at Deloitte at the time, who said to me, look, everyone's fearful of the big red button. We have this metaphor in payroll of the big red button of doing everything. But he said in the podcast, which I'd never heard it before, and it's always stuck with me, he said, isn't that ultimately though where we want to get to? And AI could enable us to get to that point where there is a button we can press and payroll is run seamlessly, which will enable payroll to have more of a role looking after the trust element of the payroll process, looking at the employee experience, the flexible ways we understand our pay slips, the ability to support financial wealth and health and things like that. And I thought it was really interesting because historically we've always kind of pushed back against that red button. That's not because the role is complex and people don't necessarily understand it. But from your perspective as a tech innovator and potentially disruptor in this world of AI and payroll, do you think that is somewhere we ultimately want to get to so that payroll can finally become more strategic?
Yeah, I think it's quite a way off, Nick. I mean, I think
agree.
even in the system I've described in our system, where there's huge amount of automation, workflows, AIs, stuff coming in, we absolutely rely on having a human operator. As I say, we can't rely on the internet being there. We can't rely on HMRC always responding. We can't rely on people even getting their data in. And so I think definitely where we are today and for the foreseeable future but it can make a huge difference, is really using AI to massively reduce the load, okay? So if we can take the workload, 3 days work down to 3 hours, that's huge. But we still need a person for those 3 hours. So yeah, it might get there, yeah, definitely could. But certainly where we are today, and certainly for the next, years, as we can see, it's definitely, the person, like the man and the machine, or the lady in the machine, if you like to put it that way, is critical. And so, certainly the way we built our system is we know there are some things that are going to be difficult, if not impossible to do. And so we rely on a person. And so the two things that we do is, first of all the automation I've described, we allow the operator to run. So if they want to, press that button, absolutely they can do it. Okay. And the second thing is what payroll people told us very clearly is, show me what you're doing. Okay. So I want to see if you automatically went and fetched all the tax codes. I want to know when they were fetched and when they were applied, and I want to be able to run it as well. So those are really the two key things. Then, of course, when anything goes wrong, control has to hand back over to the human as well. So some really important interaction points between allowing the humans to kick off a process, allowing a human to see everything that the process did, and then when it doesn't work, handing over control very elegantly back to the human, so they can rerun the process or use intellect to figure out why it didn't work.
Absolutely. I'll go back just to summarize before we open the payroll vault, which is very much payroll moving, in your words, from operator to programmer. And actually from a recruitment lens, just to remind everybody here, like programmers also earn a lot more than operators. So this is a positive step in many other ways as well that perhaps undiscovered yet, but I'm sure we'll discover over time. Well, look, fantastic overview on AI, and thank you for demystifying many of those aspects and supporting our listeners with an education on how AI can really influence the payroll space. I'm going to open the payroll vault. So we've got 3 short, sharp questions here for you, Mark. The first one is this. I'm going to try and make them a little bit AI focused to keep things on track.
Of course.
What piece of advice you would give to payroll professionals who are unsure where to begin with AI?
Sure. Okay. Well, I think it's absolutely try it. Okay. So here's the thing. It's a journey. Even where we are today, it's a learning curve. So I'd absolutely encourage everyone that's listening is try it out. Okay. And it's going to take you a while to learn it. You're not going to learn it in a day or a week or whatever. It's really going to take some time. So the first thing is literally try it out, give it a go, and start learning, and start honing your skills. And depending on where people are, figure out how much you might have to learn a bit about programming, how much you might have to get much more fluent in workflows and Excel and things like that. But absolutely give it a go. We make it very easy. And the nice thing is, if you can just set aside a little bit of time, we absolutely, we'd love the more people to try it out. And so that's probably the first thing I'd suggest to anyone, viewing this podcast.
Fantastic advice. And to remind everybody to save your weekend, you do not need to do what I did and go and do a Python certification. It's not it was helpful maybe for me to have the understanding, but completely unnecessary.
I'm
Okay,
impressed, Nick. I'm impressed.
what impact do you hope to leave on the payroll profession?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it sort of goes back to what we said at the beginning, that, payroll, as it is today, largely is very manual. It's very 1980s. It's horribly stressful. Okay. Payroll people are just pulling their hair out. They're not properly valued. It really isn't a great profession to be in. And we actually want to flip it on its head. And so I think the thing is, and again, I'd encourage anyone to go and look at some of the Trustpilot reviews for our customers, is suddenly now they love payroll. So once you automate all this thing and you de-stress it and you bring the employees in, suddenly it goes from a manual experience to an automated experience and an enjoyable experience. And so that's the big thing. So we really want, I suppose my vision is, I want payroll people to absolutely love doing payroll and to be much more fulfilled by it, and not feel stressed, not feel having to do overtime, not feeling undervalued, but really love doing it because they're able to provide a great service, and they've got time in the day to work with the employees and their other departments to actually make sure do the very best.
Yeah, fantastic. I guess I think ultimately employees always are happier when you have a little bit of freedom to play. I think of a football analogy, when there's too much structure or too much work, manual workflow, and you lose that ability to be creative or to have your own oversight, it just becomes a little bit more stifled. And I think that freedom and that time back, I can understand how huge impact on
and the other thing, Nick, is when you think about it today, is the entire onus of payroll is on the payroll manager.
It is, yes.
They're almost like that. It's this whole weight, if you're doing a 100-person payroll or a 5,000-person payroll, the entire weight of getting it right is now on your head, if you like. Okay, so it's horrible. Okay, it's horrible, right? But with self-service and LivePay, suddenly now you distributed the load, and with automation, it's not all on it's not, if you like, all on your shoulders to do. So that's why it becomes a lot more pleasurable.
Well, maybe that will lean into my final question. I know what's coming here. I ask most of my guests this, but if payroll then was a movie, a book, or a song, what would it be and why? And I asked that because I was just thinking great power comes great responsibility with what you were just saying. But yeah, what would it be for you?
What would it be? A movie. Okay. Okay. So how about this then, Nick? Okay. So I think it would be a James Bond movie. Okay.
Wonderful.
And there'll be two reasons for that. Number one is everybody enjoys James Bond. Okay. And so the same way as, our vision is that, all the payroll operators love, enjoy doing their job in the future. So you enjoy James Bond, enjoy, doing your job. Okay. And the other thing in James Bond is it's full of lots of clever gadgets that do things. And I think AI payroll is the same way. There's lots of little clever gadgets that do things. Obviously I've described a lot of them now, but just like James Bond enjoys not having to, to use these gadgets, I think the AI payroll profession of tomorrow will be able to make use of lots of little technologies to make their job much, much easier. So I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but that's one.
That's great. Payroll fun again. No, I think it's good. And I understand it. The AI, the gadget reference resonates. So I can understand it. Look, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today on the Payroll Podcast. For those that do want to find out more, the website is Payroll. That's Payroll with an AI. So PAYROLL.com. So just add an I into the word payroll, the AI action, then you'll be able to link straight through to that. There will, of course, be a link in the show notes. If you're still unsure, click straight through to the episode notes of this show, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, or even if you're connecting with us today on YouTube, that link will be in the show notes of today's episode, so you can click straight through to find out more. I will also put a link into Mark Paraskeva's LinkedIn profile if you want to connect with Mark, ask him some questions about AI, find out more about the solution or his views or where you can get started on your AI journey. I'm sure Mark will be very open to connecting with you. So that link will also be in the show notes. Just want to say one more huge thank you to Mark for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast on a subject that, it's making waves, it's making headlines, and we're trying to demystify, we're trying to understand it. And I think you've given us a great starting point, a great foundation today to help our listeners really get to grips with the future of payroll, but also how AI can really play a role in improving payroll for the whole industry. So thank you ever so much. Please remember to subscribe, follow, and review the show if you can. Actually, if you do give us a review, that really helps broaden and widen our audience. So if you have a spare moment and you're feeling really generous, please do give us a review. Remember to share this with your colleagues and friends. And I look forward to bringing you the next episode of the Payroll Podcast real soon. You've been with Mark Paraskeva today, and I've been your host. My name is Nick Day, and I'll speak to you again soon. Thank you. Cheers, Mark.
Thank you, Nick.
Global teams are more connected today than ever, but managing payroll, HR, and IT can still feel fragmented. But Deel simplifies global work with one platform that keeps everything running smoothly. No compliance guesswork, no third-party payroll, just seamless operations backed by 24/7 expert support. That's why over 35,000 companies trust Deel to handle their global workforce. Visit deel.com/nickday to see how Deel can help. That's DEEL.com/NICKDAY. Deel, your forever people platform.